In this video, we're going to discuss the strategy I use with my students to get them marching correctly in a 2-4 or 6-8 competition environment. So for those that don't know, once you're in grade 4 and above, you typically have to march when you compete in a 2-4 or a 6-8 march. In grade 5, this is typically not a requirement, but it is for the higher grades. And what do they mean by march? Well, they want you moving in step while you're playing. I used to just kind of randomly march one direction, mark time, which is kind of walking in place, and then turning around, returning back to where I started and kind of going back and forth. There's often actually some raised platform or the boards that you can march on, especially if it's muddy outside, though here in North America, that's a little less common. But you typically get a small area to walk within while you're playing your tunes. But fairly early on in grade 4, during one of my competitions, I accidentally played through the third part of my 2-4 march 3 times instead of 2 and was disqualified. After that, I decided to come up with a strategy that would keep me knowing exactly where I was in the tune, and today I'm going to share it with you guys. In the description below, there's a link to the PDF document we'll be looking at today, so go ahead, print that out, have it in front of you so you can follow along. Now I want to start, this is not the way to march. This is just a strategy I use that has helped me and has helped my students be successful, but by no means is this like what you have to do. If it just gives you some ideas on ways that you might approach marching that improves your ability to stay in tune, on target, all of that stuff, then you've gotten something out of the video already. The idea is fairly straightforward. We're going to march, which really is walking. We'll talk about that more in a moment. We're going to march for 4 counts, a left, a right, a left, and a right in one direction. Then we're going to mark time, which is just standing in place for 4 counts, 2, 3, 4. Then we're going to turn to the right for 4 counts. We're going to then mark time for 4 more counts. And by then, you're at the end of the part. Let's use the simple tune that just about every piper knows, High Road to Gairloch, to demonstrate how what I just described gets you through part 1. And I'm just going to kind of mime it with my hands and sing the melody. And I recommend you mark time, which again is just walking in place for probably 4 counts before you start, probably holding just a low A. It helps kind of, well, get you in step before you actually start moving. Left, right, left, right, left to right, and left and right. Mark time, and then you march in place. Turn to the right and keep on turning. Mark time, you're at the end of the part. Left to right and left and right. Mark time, ba-da-dum, da-da-dum, da. Bum, da-da, bum, da-da-dum, bum, bum, ba-da-da-dum, da-da-dum, da-da-dum, da. So on and so forth. So you can see when we were moving that way, it was telling us that we were on the first time through the part. In this case, we're going to walk toward the trees we have out here for the first time through the part. Then we will mark time, turn, and march in place. And you know you're going through the second time through the part when you're marching away from the trees, or maybe towards the mirror. In this case, I'm actually looking at the bagpipes on my wall. And that gives me kind of a target to look at to know that I'm now on the second time through the part. I'm going to then repeat the same thing. I'm going to walk or march for 4 steps, mark time for 4 steps, turn to the right for a count of 4, and then mark time for 4 more. So I'm now looking at the trees knowing I'm on part 2 the first time through, and we just do this over and over till you're at the end of the tune. I've had people claim this seems needlessly busy and difficult to keep track of, but if you practice it on your own for the weeks or months leading up to the competition, you'll get very used to the idea of the 4 steps, the marking time, the turning, and the 4 steps, which equals 16 counts, which is the number of beats per part of a 2-4 march, or a 6-8 march, by the way. Something to note when picking landmarks for direction 1 and direction 2, pick a landmark that's not easily mobile or obscured. Don't have a Suburban over here and like another car over here, and then when you're marching the wrong way, the Suburban pulls away, and then you turn around and it's no longer there. Ask me how I know this. Pick a tree or something large so that even if a Suburban were to pull in front of you, you'd be able to see the general vicinity of the thing you were looking at over here, as well as over here, so that you have some fairly permanent landmarks. Like if there's a mountain range, perfect. You know that's on direction 2. And maybe the lack of a mountain range might be enough to know you're going in direction 1. Now I'm going to demonstrate this with the classic tune, the 79th Farewell to Gibraltar, parts 1 and 2, so you can get a general idea of how I'm moving through this. If you are interested in personalized bagpipe instruction, I do give lessons both in person and online. Head to www.commandyourbagpipe.com or email me at the address you see here, and we'll get you going. I'm working with folks from all over the planet, and I hope to work with you soon. Something to keep in mind, as you're marching, a lot of people have the kind of idea that you're marching like kids do, like when they're like going around the playground. We don't want to be stomping our feet. We want to try to be moving quite smoothly. The more jostling your motion is, the more your bagpipe is going to be moving all over the place on your shoulder. That's going to make it hard to stay steady. And it just doesn't look great to be stomping. It's not clap, stomp, stomp. It should be nice, smooth motions with your feet. You don't have to lift your feet terribly high. Obviously, lift them high enough that you're not stumbling over whatever might be on the ground, but you want to be moving as smoothly as possible. Also, I'm marching forward for 4 steps because in my experience, especially at the lower levels, the amount of area I often had to compete in just wasn't large enough to really allow more steps than that and have them be of a reasonable length. That said, if the boards or area you're competing in is larger than that and allows you to take more steps, you're allowed to take 6 steps forward in one direction, maybe just mark time for 2, or maybe even march the full 8, turn, mark time, and then march the full 8 the other way as you do the repeat of the part. That said, if you've practiced this style, 4 counts each, marching, marking time, turning, and marking time before going into the next part, that is far easier to extend and keep marching rather than marking time. If you're used to marching 8 steps, turning and marking time, and then marching 8 steps, and you find you simply don't have the room to do that, it can take a little bit more mental energy in the moment. And by all means, practice marching both 4 steps and 8 steps. Practice marching 6 steps and marking time for 2. Again, this is just a strategy to try to keep you organized on where you're at in the tune. It is certainly not the end-all be-all guide to how to march. You're not going to see any of the top flight pro players, to my knowledge, marching with this method per se, but they all do some version of marching, marking time, turning, marking time, marching. Sometimes they'll go straight from turning to marching again. They clearly have a very clear understanding of their tune under their fingers and kind of embody the whole thing, and that's awesome. I've just found for me, this slightly more mathematical, structured way keeps me marching, well, with the tune and in time. I want to give a quick shout out to the members of my Patreon community. You'll see their names now scrolling up. I'd love to add your name to this list. They often get early access to videos and other perks, so go check it out, and thank you for the support. Also to note, this is for both 2/4 marches and 6/8 marches. Both have the same number of beats per bar and the same number of bars per part. So a 6/8 march works just as well using this method as a 2/4. In fact, even most 4/4s you could use this marching method too, like Scotland the Brave. While there are 4 beats per bar in a 4/4 versus a 2/4, you don't repeat the parts in most 4/4 marches. So by the time you get to the end of the first part, you have done the first this direction and that direction. So the math is a little different, but it still works out at the end. But 3/4 marches have 50% more beats than a 2/4, a 6/8, or a 4/4. So this method, you're not going to end up where you need to with a 3/4, but I haven't seen a competition 3/4 event where you need to march. So I wouldn't really worry about that one. But to demonstrate this with Scott and the Brave, left, right, bum bum da la ba dee dum ba dum bum bum ba dum bum ba dum bum bum da da bee da bum 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 ba ba dum ba dum ba dum ba dum bum 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 ba dum bum 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 da da bum 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 ba-dum ba-bum da da. You get the idea. By the time we march this way through line 1, that way through line 2, and we're ready to get into part 2 of the 4/4, when we started going back to direction 1. I encourage you to practice this method with all of the 2/4, 6/8, and 4/4 marches you have in your repertoire to really kind of embody this motion so that you're not just associating this with your one competition tune. And if you find over time this starts moving and shifting into something different, that's awesome. Again, this is just a strategy to kind of get you started in marching in an organized capacity. And a quick plug for my online merch store where you can get things like this prescription bagpipe mug, as well as my best-selling Highland Bagpipe Ornament Tree poster that you can see right here. But there's also the Command Your Bagpipe line of t-shirts and other things, so go let the world know you command your bagpipe. Link to the store in the description below. Another few points I wanted to discuss. When you're starting up your pipes in a solo environment, you don't have to do a strict pipe band style start. In fact, I wouldn't recommend that at all. There's no need to tune. Take your time, get your pipes up, let the drone settle in, get the chanter sounding, do whatever final tuning you need to do. Most game rules give you a time limit on how long you have to do your final tuning once you're in front of the judge, typically 3 to 5 minutes, though at the lower levels, I wouldn't recommend spending that much time. It's probably not gonna help you and just make you nervous. And once the chanter's sounding, personally, I kept the chanter going the whole time. Once it was going, I would do whatever I needed to do and then get into the tune. I wouldn't stop the chanter yet again. I don't know if there's any sort of rule about this per se, but that's what I saw all the other competitors doing, so it's what I did. It never seemed to hurt anything. And on the other end of the spectrum, when you're at the end of the tune, keep blowing, squeezing, doing your normal tone generating process all the way through the very last moment of your tune before you worry about a cutoff. There's no need, again, to do a strict pipe band style cutoff. Ba-da-dum-brum. No. Ba-da-dum-brum. Some higher level competitors will even come up with an ending cadence. I was never quite that fancy. I would just get to the end of the tune, making sure that I've played that final note for its full duration, not worrying about trying to get a cutoff. And then, for all intents and purposes, the judging is over. I can then focus on a good, clean cutoff somewhere down the road, not trying to end it crisply like a pipe band. There are different things that you're being judged for in solos versus the competition pipe band world. I thought I'd throw that in there. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. If you enjoyed this video, check out this guy right here where we go over the basics of how to count bagpipe rhythms, or this playlist right here where I go over all the intermediate bagpipe embellishments that you need to master to improve your piping. Until next time, everybody, I'm Matt Willis. Cheers.